This is a short presentation about the Jagged Globe expedition to Ojos del Salado. This is probably the highest mountain in the world that few climbers in Europe have heard of. It's the highest mountain in Chile, the highest volcano in the world, the second highest mountain in South America, and therefore the second highest mountain in the world outside the Himalayas. It's located on the Chile-Argentina border, but is easiest to access from the Chilean side, and was first climbed by two Polish climbers in 1937. I went there for the first time in 2018, which is when these pictures are taken, but this was an unusually snowy season. The climbing season's normally mid-December through to early February. These pictures are a little later in the season, which is February, and as you can see, there was a lot of snow around. This is not usual, so I'm just showing a few pictures of these conditions very briefly, and this is Carolina and myself on the summit. But what I'm going to spend most of the time on is showing what the mountain would be like in more normal conditions, which is much drier. But it is just worth bearing in mind that it can be snowy, and therefore we need to take the equipment to cope with the snow. We fly to Copiapó in Chile's Atacama region, and then all our travel from then on is going to be in these privately hired four-wheel drive vehicles that transport the team plus all of our equipment and our local crew. We climb 3 or 4 mountains during this trip, and on the journey into base camp, we stop off at Laguna Santa Rosa to climb the peak of Mariacunga. And this is our first campsite as we approach Laguna Santa Rosa, then over a pass at just under 4,000 meters, and down to camp beside the edge of the lake. And from there, we make our ascent of the first peak, Mariacunga, just under 5,000 meters. So unusual things about this trip, you can drive very high. So these acclimatization walks are important, and the terrain underfoot is generally quite easy, stony. Not a lot of snow's not going to be encountered except very high on Ojos. So other footwear, although we need double boots for the cold conditions on Ojos, we need lighter footwear for these acclimatization hikes, and this on the summit of Mariacunga. We then drive to Laguna Verde at 4,300 meters. This is probably the most pleasant campsite on the trip, so we do spend a couple of days here while climbing surrounding mountains in order to get acclimatized before moving up to Ojos. We can walk around the lake, which is an interesting hike. Lots of interesting bird life to be seen on the walk around the lake. And we can then drive to 5,000 meters in order to make the ascent of Nevado San Francisco, which is just over 6,000 meters. You can see the Laguna Verde in the background. Again, a fairly straightforward trail, best done in normal hiking boots or shoes, and possibly one of the most accessible 6,000 meter peaks in the world. Certainly a lot more straightforward to get to than most of the Himalayan 6,000 meter peaks, and possible to do in light footwear without stepping on snow. So now we've been to 6,000 meters, it's time to move on to Ojos itself. And this photograph showing more typical snow-free conditions with just a few patches of ice high up. It's possible to drive by vehicle to the base camp at 5,200 meters, where it can be quite windy. So we've set all our tents up with these snow walls to protect them. It's possible for the vehicles to drive higher, but in order to give us time to acclimatise, we're going to walk from the Atacama camp up to Refugio Tejos, 5,800 metres. We walked up here for an acclimatisation day and back down to the camp with the vehicles, and then we came up here for the second time and spent the night in the hut. A small pleasant hut with room for about 10 people. So with our small group, we were able to occupy it ourselves. If there are other groups around, it would be a bit cramped. So we have the option of moving our tents from base camp up to this site. And then starting in the dark, my memory of the climb was that it was particularly cold. And I think this is something to note about this trip, that while all the acclimatization trips are happening in daytime with the temperatures quite benign, the only time on this trip that it's necessary to wear our big boots and our big jacket is on summit day. And it was so cold and windy on the climb to the summit that I didn't take any photographs for the first 90% of the journey, and it was only once we were above the crater lake at 6,700 meters I got the camera out. And you can see just from the clothing that people are wearing at almost 7,000 meters, it doesn't really take much of a breeze for it to feel very cold. So although the early acclimatization hikes here happen in quite benign conditions, it's necessary to have proper cold weather footwear and cold weather clothing in order to climb to the summit. Two summits, almost identical height, the higher one here on the right, and we've got 3 of our climbers with the flag on the summit. So entirely a hike except for the final 50 meters, and this just a shot on our descent from the summit, showing the steep rocky bit where there are about 30, 40, 50 meters of fixed rope. So it's necessary to carry a lightweight harness just for that final bit, and then a long walk down. So possibly 9-10 hours from Tejos to the summit, and then down to Tejos, and possible to get back to the Atacama camp for the last camping night of the trip, and the following day an early start, everything packed on the vehicles, and we can drive back to the city for a good comfortable night in the hotel, and if we do have a spare day at the end, we can visit the beach before flying back from Chile to the UK. So this is a great trip that can be done over Christmas and New Year, slightly over 2 weeks in duration, but escaping the bad weather of the British winter and going to the sunshine of the Atacama Desert to climb, as I said at the start, probably the highest mountain in the world that few European mountaineers have heard of.